Rachel Zegler wasn't wrong when she said that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was very evidently from 1937. She was only wrong for thinking this was a bad thing. Disney's live-action remake of Snow White is nearly upon us. In the best case, this would have just been another scoop of reheated Disney slop, but catastrophic mistakes by the cast and the studio have made it the most pre-hated movie in Hollywood history. Snow White is predicted to bomb hard, and honestly, if Disney wants to make any money off this film at this point, they should probably just make a comedy TV series about its horribly troubled production. There were many baffling moments as this film stumbled shambolically toward its release date, like the time we found out that the Seven Dwarfs, the ones from the title of the Brothers Grimm folktale, had been replaced with magical creatures. In my earlier comments on this bizarre casting decision, I said that they looked like a bunch of software engineers on their way to their first Renaissance fair. A few people said that was a little bit unkind, but yeah, I stand by what I said. I've been to the Northern California Renaissance Fair. There are plenty of things that have come together to doom this film, like Greta Gerwig writing the script, and creepy computer graphics that will make children cry. But the greatest damage was done back in 2022 when Rachel Zegler, the film's lead actress, badmouthed the beloved movie that this remake is based on. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the film made by Disney, Walt, the actual Disney, has been admired for nearly 90 years as an artistic masterpiece, a stunning technical achievement, and a massively profitable product. Yet for reasons that can only be understood by those lacking common sense, Zegler decided to disparage it. With mean girl attitude, the lead actress sneered at the romance in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, telling a reporter,
"The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her."
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
These smug, un-Disney princess-like comments launched 1,000 memes and more than a few YouTube careers. But while I disagree with Zegler's attitude toward the fact that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is very much an artifact of 1937, I completely agree with the substance. When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered, the Great Depression was in its 9th year. Unemployment was rising again. Nazi Germany was only a few months away from annexing Austria and seizing a chunk of Czechoslovakia. The future didn't look terribly bright, and moviegoers didn't want, but actually needed something to lighten hearts with a message of hope. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a faithful adaptation of the folktale recorded by the Brothers Grimm. But Disney's first princess is also a representation of what Americans were going through in the 1930s. At the beginning of the film, Snow White is in rags, reduced from royalty to drudgery. This is an image that brings to mind America's wealth in the 1920s, which crashed in 1929 and brought the country low for a decade. Yet despite her fallen status, Snow White is still worthy of love, kindness, and admiration. She was instantly relatable to millions of down-on-their-luck Americans, perhaps especially the fathers who had lost their ability to provide for their families. When the prince comes to visit Snow White at the beginning of the film, she's embarrassed by her ragged appearance. But she brushes her skirt down, pats her hair into place, and goes out to flirt right back at the guy with one song, only for her. Never mind how she's dressed. There's no way to count the number of moviegoers who watched this scene wearing threadbare dresses and suits during the Great Depression, but it undoubtedly made them sit just a bit taller. From the get-go, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs told audiences that although times were hard, hope and dignity cost nothing. But movies need peril, and Snow White was about to encounter plenty of that. She's nearly stabbed and then is banished into the woods with no supplies other than an impractical pair of heels and a ball gown. Understandably, she freaks out a little. This part of the movie isn't a sexist mockery of feminine weakness, as some cynical modern critics claim. The entire nation panicked in the wake of the stock market crash of 1929. The economy destabilized with shocking speed. Jobs vanished. Banks went under. Family savings vaporized. Many Americans knew what it was like to be Snow White, face down on the ground, sobbing, with no idea of how to survive. In fact, some didn't. Although this was a faithful retelling of the German folktale, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is also the story of an American girl. When the panic subsides, she gives herself a gentle scolding, picks herself up, and gets to work on improving her situation. She even apologizes to the startled animals in the woods, giving herself the cartoon equivalent of one of President Roosevelt's fireside chats. "I'm awfully sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you, but you don't know what I've been through. And all because I was afraid. I'm so ashamed of the fuss I've made. What do you do when things go wrong? Oh, you sing a song." This speech is the most 1937 part of the whole film. Things had gone terribly wrong, but the United States was going to get through by keeping a cool head, using entertainment to distract from stress and fear, and getting to work on a brighter future. However, there are depressing signs that 2025's Snow White won't include any of these themes. The previews indicate that Greta Gerwig's script will be full of her predictably hollow girl bossery, and the new songs shoehorned into the soundtrack sound nothing like the originals and are about the boring subject of personal identity. Both Snow White and the Evil Queen are getting newly penned songs that they sing about themselves. Whistling is no longer something Snow White does to encourage a good work ethic, but some kind of inspirational lesson from her deceased mother? In contrast, the 1937 movie's songs place emphasis on what the characters do or hope to do rather than who they are. Songs like Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work aren't just catchy Hollywood numbers. They allowed viewers to vicariously experience the satisfaction of earning a living and coming home proud of a good day's work. After months or even years of unemployment, people in 1937 would have felt the meanings of these songs deeply, and I think modern-day people struggling with job insecurity can still relate. Even the silly song serves the plot and characters, although it would be easy to mistake it as only a chance for Walt Disney to show off the technical skill of his animators. Before Snow White and the dwarfs found one another, their lives were in disarray. The dwarfs were sloppy and didn't get along together as well as they could have. Snow White was lonely and desperate. By showing kindness and compassion to one another, they were able to build a clean, warm, and pleasant home together, one that was filled with laughter and music and good food shared at a common table. Snow White understood that the dwarf's rough approach to Grumpy wasn't working, and instead, she wins him over with a light touch. Working through the hard times together led to the kind of moment that life is really about, making great memories with those closest to you. As the silly song ends, Snow White speaks for everyone, including viewers, when she sighs,
That was fun.
In years past, marriage kind of felt more compulsory from a cultural standpoint, and I'm glad that we've moved beyond that. But at the same time, there seems to have been a trend in recent decades to altogether disparage the notion of love and companionship, as if that's not a deeply rooted thing that most people want and need. Zegler's smug comments dismiss the role of the prince, and even any value he might have had to Snow White in making her happy as a husband or rescuing her from an evil spell.
It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess.
But back in 1937, it was still normal to acknowledge that most people want to find a partner to build a life with. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs showed both the prince and Snow White as sweet, romantic, caring people who yearned for love. There are 3 whole songs in the film that are just about love. Snow White starts out wishing for the prince, and then her wish is granted when he shows up to sing one song. He's so tender and gentle that I'm just honestly baffled by people who look at this film and go, "Ugh, it's so toxic. Falling in love is so old-fashioned." Yeah, it is old-fashioned. And you know what?
People might just need a little old-fashioned.
If you think about how the Wishing Well song and one song come together, it's very easy to see that Someday My Prince Will Come was not some kind of tradwife anthem. It speaks to the deep, sincere longing that all people have for love, security, a home, friends, and a place in the community. Snow White's desire to be reunited with her prince not only reflected Depression-era America's longing for a brighter future, but the character's desire for a loving home after escaping her abusive childhood. But what did the actors in the remake have to say about all this?
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
She's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Except we like it when she's saved by the prince, because we want the prince, whatever he represents, to save us too. Disney's Snow White is a fantasy about escaping from all your problems. It's kind of hard to imagine how a song like Someday My Prince Will Come would even fit into a film that has Snow White leading a peasant mob to storm the castle like Che Guevara in a frock. 2025's Snow White fails to understand why the 1937 original continues to speak to viewers after almost a century. The remake's previews show Snow White ordering the dwarfs about instead of working side by side with them. Because girl bosses don't get their hands dirty with icky, yucky housework, even if that's what you would expect of a decent housemate. Snow White has been beloved for nearly 90 years because she's resilient, hardworking, optimistic, kind, and resourceful. Without breaking the structure or characters of the original folktale, Walt Disney somehow managed to transform this character into a picture-perfect American dream, inspiring her fellow citizens to keep their chins up and work together toward better days. The character's impact is all the greater because she was voiced by Adriana Caselotti, who came from an Italian immigrant family, had to learn English as a teenager, and yet managed to become Disney's first princess. Both the character of Snow White and the young woman who voiced her are examples of the American dream. That's why I was left scratching my head when there was that ugly debate over representation, like, yeah, it's personally interesting that Rachel Zegler is half Colombian, but this isn't some kind of groundbreaking representation. Snow White has already been voiced by a young woman from an immigrant background, especially when you consider that back in the 30s, Italians weren't really considered white and often experienced horrible discrimination. When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs hit theaters way back in 1937, the importance of the film was so obvious that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences invented an entirely new type of Oscar just to recognize the greatness of its technical and artistic achievements. And it was presented to Walt Disney by Shirley Temple, along with 7 miniature Oscars just to drive the point home. 2025's Snow White has the most downvoted trailer in YouTube history. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so, is a comment that will haunt Rachel Zegler for the rest of her career. And that's a shame, because had the actress delivered this line as a compliment rather than an insult, she could have endeared herself to audiences as someone who understood the artistic, technical, financial, and cultural success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The 2025 remake, in my opinion, is unlikely to be any good, but it could have been received as an unnecessary, if well-meaning, homage whose dodgy CGI and awkwardly fitting new songs failed to quite live up to the original. But after all, audiences might have charitably thought, what could live up to Disney's first masterpiece? As it is, the disrespectful attitudes of Snow White's filmmakers and its lead star toward the 1937 classic served up a poison apple that killed off the slightest chance that audiences would have any goodwill toward this remake. The filmmakers and actors behind this impending box office bomb may have willfully misunderstood the hopeful, kind-hearted message at the heart of the 1937 original, but the public never has. The themes of optimism, friendship, hard work, and romance that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs drew upon during the dark days of the Great Depression are still relevant today. And Disney's masterpiece will remain untarnished as a cinematic achievement. Never mind the shallow counterfeit crouching in its shadow.